Welcome to another deep dive. We're just so thrilled you're joining us today.
Absolutely.
You, the lifelong learner, the person who, never quite lost that childhood urge to look at the world and ask, but why?
Right. The best kind of listener.
Exactly. Well, today we are taking a massive stack of research, articles, and notes on a topic that is going to fundamentally rewire how you look at the world around you.
It really is. It's a total perspective shift.
We're setting out on a very specific mission today. We want to completely shatter the age-old and frankly, kind of boring assumption that life is just a giant passive biochemical machine.
Yeah, that mechanistic view.
Right. For centuries, the standard textbook narrative has told us that organisms are basically just wet robots. You know the drill.
We're supposedly all just walking meat sacks following rigid chemical code.
Yes, but the sources we've gathered today suggest something radically different and honestly a lot more magical.
They do. That traditional mechanistic perspective
Hmm.
has dominated biology for a very long time.
Too long, probably.
Oh, definitely. It treats life as just a sequence of self-replicating molecules, metabolic pathways, and simple stimulus-response tripwires.
Like you poke the organism, it reacts.
Exactly. But the source material we're diving into today introduces a massive paradigm shift through an interdisciplinary field called biosemiotics.
Biosemiotics. Okay, let's unpack this because I know that sounds like a heavy academic concept that might, put someone to sleep.
It sounds intimidating, I know.
But stick with us because by the end of this deep dive, you are going to completely rethink how every living thing interacts with the world, from a single microscopic cell to an entire sprawling forest.
That's the promise.
So, what exactly is biosemiotics? Let's start there.
To put it simply, biosemiotics posits that life isn't just about molecular machinery. It is fundamentally about semiosis.
Semiosis.
Right. Semiosis is the production and interpretation of signs. Meaning-making isn't just a byproduct of life, and it's certainly not something only humans do with language. According to this field, the act of interpreting a sign is the very essence of being alive.
Wow.
Every organism is an active interpreter of its world, not a passive information processor.
I want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. To start us off, the research brings up a concept that literally redefines reality for different animals. It's a term called the
Umwelt.
Umwelt.
The Umwelt, yes.
Umwelt. Got it.
This term was coined by the biologist Jacob von Uexküll. To really grasp biosemiotics, you first have to let go of the idea that there is one universal, objective environment that all creatures are simply wandering around inside.
Like we're all just sharing the same stage.
Exactly. According to the concept of the Umwelt, there is no single objective reality that everyone shares. Instead, every single organism constructs its own subjective, species-specific perceptual world based entirely on its unique sensory and motor filters.
Okay, the notes we have use the example of a tick, which I think perfectly illustrates this.
It's the classic example.
Right. So imagine you are walking through a forest. You see the towering trees, you hear the birds chirping, you feel the wind on your face.
A beautiful hike?
Yeah, and you naturally assume the tick waiting on a branch right next to you is experiencing the exact same forest. But a tick doesn't know what a forest is, does it?
Not at all. A tick doesn't perceive a tree or hear a bird. Its entire reality, its entire Umwelt, is sculpted by what biosemiotics calls qualisigns.
Qualisigns.
Yes. For the tick, the universe is incredibly narrow. It consists of just three things.
Just three.
Just three. The smell of a specific chemical called butyric acid, which is emitted by mammalian skin, a specific temperature, and a physical form like hair to grab onto.
That's it.
That is its whole cosmos. There is no visual landscape, just a dark void until one of those three signs appears.
Wait, hold on. So when the tick smells the butyric acid, it isn't doing some tiny mental calculation. It's not a tiny computer processing the thought, a mammal is approaching, I should prepare to jump.
That is the crucial distinction. The butyric acid isn't information being uploaded into a tick's brain for logical deduction.
Okay.
In biosemiotics, that smell serves as a direct invitation to act. It is a sign that triggers a physical action tendency, specifically the urge to let go of the branch and drop.
So it's not thinking about dropping.
No, the meaning isn't derived from some external observer's perspective or a logical thought process. The meaning is created entirely by the organism's own biological filters. The smell literally means the action of dropping.
That is wild. So the smell is the action.
Yes.
And our sources bring up an even stranger example with weakly electric fish, like the electric eel.
Okay.
How does their reality work?
Oh, this is fascinating. Weakly electric fish don't see the way we do. They actively electrolocate.
Meaning they...
They generate their own electric fields around their bodies and then receive distortions in those fields.
Okay, like a radar.
Sort of. But they aren't interpreting those distortions as signals about distant objects. For the fish, the distortions are the objects. The environment actually becomes an extension of the organism's own bodily processes.
Right.
It creates a semiotic field where the boundary between self and world completely dissolves.
Because they're feeling their own electricity.
Exactly. They're literally feeling their way through a world made of their own electricity.
I want you, the listener, to just picture that for a second. Imagine you are walking through a park later today. Based on this research, you aren't just walking through a single physical space filled with grass and squirrels.
You're not.
You are literally passing through millions of invisible, overlapping realities, millions of umwelten.
Yes.
You're walking through the tick's universe of butyric acid, the dog's universe of complex scent trails, the bee's universe of ultraviolet floral patterns. You can't perceive any of them, but they are all happening simultaneously, layered right on top of each other.
It's a beautiful way to frame it. It completely decentralizes the human experience.
It really does.
And it scales up fascinatingly when we look at collective behaviors. If we move from the individual organism to something like a honeybee hive,
Oh, I'm glad you brought up the bees.
biosemiotics completely reconfigures how we understand these complex systems.
Because we usually think of a beehive in very rigid industrial terms. We call it a machine or a strict militaristic society.
Right.
We're taught that everyone has a programmed job, the queen gives the orders, and the workers blindly execute them like little factory employees.
Biosemiotics insists the hive is none of those things. Instead, it frames the hive as a semiotic cosmos.
A semiotic cosmos.
It is a living, breathing milieu where every act is a sign and every sign is a life, meaning isn't pre-given or programmed from the top down. It emerges dynamically through the interactions of all these sign-generating organisms working together.
Okay.
Take the wax comb, for instance. Traditional biology views the honeycomb merely as a physical shelf.
Right, like organic Tupperware. Just a place to store honey and raise the babies.
But in a biosemiotic framework, the comb is what they call a semiotic scaffold.
Semiotic scaffold.
The hexagonal cells aren't just arbitrary physical shapes. They are semiotically optimized for stability and resource storage. Their geometry is actually a sign of the colony's collective needs, and that shapes structures and organizes the colony's ongoing behavior.
So they are reading their architecture.
Exactly. The bees are reading their architecture. And as for the queen bee, her pheromones are often thought of as regulatory commands, like a boss barking orders over a loudspeaker.
Are they not? Because
No.
that's definitely how it was explained to me in biology class. She releases a chemical, and they obey.
It goes deeper than that. They are actually semiotic anchors.
Anchors.
Yes, they stabilize the interpretive coherence of the colony. They create a semiotic field where worker bees align their actions through iterative sign exchanges. They aren't blindly obeying a chemical command. They are constantly interpreting her presence to coordinate their own local interactions.
Which brings us to my absolute favorite part of the bee research.
The waggle dance.
The waggle dance. It is so heavily mischaracterized in popular science.
Entirely.
We're taught that the waggle dance is basically a coded GPS coordinate. Like the bee is transmitting human-style language. You know, go north 3 miles, turn left at the big oak tree, and you'll find the nectar.
What's fascinating here is that the waggle dance is fundamentally a performative act.
Yeah.
It is not a symbolic, abstract code that the receiving bees stand back and cognitively decode.
They aren't crunching the numbers.
No, it's an embodied performance. The dancing bee translates spatial relationships, like the angle of the sun, the distance to the flower, into physical motor possibilities.
So if they aren't standing around reading a map and doing the math, how do they know where to go?
They physically resonate with the dance. They enact a shared orientation to the environment. The spatial relationships become available for their own bodies to act upon.
Okay.
They are swept up in the physical movement of the scout bee.
So instead of handing them a piece of paper with coordinates, it's more like getting the whole crowd to do the wave at a sports stadium. They're feeling the movement, getting caught up in the rhythm of the journey, and joining in.
That's a fantastic analogy. It is a shared physical momentum rather than a transmission of data. And the research shares incredible examples of ants and termites doing similar things.
Oh, right, the tandem runs.
Yes. There's a species of ant that does these tandem runs to guide recruits to food. It's not just follow my scent trail. It's a tactile dialogue.
A dialogue.
The scout moves, the recruit follows, but there are hesitations, Physical taps, chemical cues. It's a real-time negotiation. The meaning of follow me is dynamically co-created between the two insects.
It's almost like they're holding hands and pulling each other along, checking to make sure the other is still there.
Exactly. And then with termites, they use vibrational signals that carry multiple layers of meaning depending on who receives it.
How does that work?
Well, a worker might interpret the vibration as a cue for nest defense, while the queen interprets it within a broader colony management framework.
From the exact same vibration.
Yes, meaning is a distributed phenomenon. It adapts and crystallizes through interaction.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've talked about ticks and bees and massive insect colonies. But the research takes this concept and shrinks it down to the absolute microscopic level.
It does.
We're zooming all the way in on the fundamental building blocks of biology, single cells.
Cellular biology is traditionally where the mechanistic view is the strongest.
Oh, absolutely.
We are taught that cellular communication is purely a stimulus-response event, the classic lock-and-key mechanism, where a molecule binds to a receptor and forces a predetermined chemical reaction, like a key turning in an ignition.
Right.
But cellular semiotics reveals that even the most basic units of life are active semiotic agents. They make interpretive choices.
Wait, hold on. You're saying a single cell makes an interpretive choice.
I am.
A cell is essentially a microscopic water balloon full of jelly.
That's one way to describe it.
It doesn't have a brain. It doesn't have a nervous system. How can it possibly choose anything? Isn't it just a blind chemical reaction?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the immune system, it becomes clearer. Let's look at how a cell encounters a pathogen. The source material refers to something called a PMP.
A PMP. What is that?
It stands for pathogen-associated molecular pattern.
Okay.
It's essentially a recognizable physical signature of a threat, like a piece of a bacteria's cell wall. The traditional view says the immune cell just blindly reacts to the physical shape of that PMP molecule, like a tripwire.
It bumps into it and boom, an alarm goes off.
Exactly.
But biosemiotics says something else is happening.
It shows that the cell doesn't just react to a molecular structure. It actively interprets it as a sign of a threat.
Ah.
The molecule is just a vehicle for a sign. This interpretation is what triggers a semiotic cascade. For instance, releasing proteins called cytokines to signal other cells.
Okay, I've heard of cytokines.
The cell evaluates the broader context,
That's
might
cool.
amplify or dampen the meaning based on other signals it's receiving, and it alters its state adaptively. It's an autonomous sign processor.
So it's not just a switch being flipped. It's taking in the signal, checking the surrounding environment, and deciding how loud to scream for help based on context.
Precisely. The research also mentions the MAPK signaling pathway, which is a complex network inside the cell. Extracellular signals, like growth factors, act as signs that the cell actively filters and evaluates before deciding how to respond.
It's evaluating. That's crazy.
Even bacteria do this. There's a species called Pseudomonas fluorescens. They use specific molecules, autoinducers, for a process called quorum sensing.
Quorum sensing. So they are basically taking a census of their population to see how many of their friends are nearby.
Yes, but it's not just a physical accumulation of chemicals. They're actively generating a sign environment, interpreting those signs, and then changing their future collective behavior based on that meaning.
Yeah.
They're talking to each other.
This is a massive aha moment for me.
Yeah.
Because it raises a huge question. If single cells and even primitive bacteria are engaging in this kind of communication.
If they're making meaning.
Yes. If they are making meaning, where did this meaning-making come from? Because traditional science says life emerged from dead matter in some primordial soup as a purely physical and chemical process. And then, millions of years later, life randomly figured out how to communicate.
Biosemiotics argues the exact opposite. It suggests that life didn't emerge from dead matter and then learn to communicate.
Then what happened?
Life actualized from a pre-existing semiotic field.
Meaning birthed life, not the other way around.
Let me build on that.
Yeah.
Consider the primordial hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean, which are widely considered the cradle of life on Earth.
Okay, picture the bottom of the ocean.
You have chemical gradients, temperature shifts, and mineral formations.
Mhm.
Biosemiotics views these not just as physical conditions, but as primitive signs.
Primitive signs.
These catalytic surfaces selected for certain molecular interactions based on their inherent semiotic fit. The chemical gradients were acting as signs that influenced the emergence of organic molecules, meaning, in a very primitive physicochemical sense, actually birthed biological life. Semiotic processes constituted living systems, rather than just being an evolutionary afterthought.
That completely flips the script on evolution, which
Yeah.
is our next stop on this deep dive.
Perfect transition.
If meaning-making is the foundational building block of life, then evolution isn't just about the survival of the fittest genes, it's about the survival of the fittest communicators. Evolution is a constant co-creation of meaning between organisms and their environments.
It is a dynamic interplay. A classic example from the text is the peacock's tail.
Right.
Traditional genetics says the elaborate train evolved simply because it signals genetic health to predators and mates.
It shows he's strong enough to survive with that giant thing on his back.
Exactly. But biosemiotics reframes the peacock's tail as a hyperbolic sign.
Meaning what, exactly?
It means it's an evolutionary escalation driven entirely by the peahen's interpretation.
The female's interpretation.
Right. The physical tail is growing larger and more absurd purely because the female demands a more exaggerated sign. The meaning of the tail is amplified through this ritualized interpretation.
So it's the demand driving the physical change.
It's the demand for the sign that drives the physical evolution of the tail, independent of direct material survival benefits. In fact, that huge tail is the terrible survival strategy. It makes it really hard to fly. But the sign is steering the physical form.
The audience's interpretation is literally altering the physical body of the performer over generations.
Exactly.
And speaking of performers, the sources highlight the incredible semiotic manipulation in cephalopods, like cuttlefish and octopuses.
Oh, they are masters of this.
Their dynamic skin patterns are famous for camouflage, but biosemiotics views this as what they call pragmatic semiosis, the act of substituting signs.
Yes, they don't just blend in. They modulate signs tailored to diverse audiences.
I marvel at this. A cuttlefish can literally split its appearance down the middle.
Right down the center.
On one side, it makes itself look like a mottled, bumpy piece of coral to hide from a predator swimming above it. But on the other side of its body, the side facing a rival cuttlefish, it might be flashing aggressive, pulsing stripes.
Two signs at once.
The exact same physical ability, changing skin pigment, carries entirely different meanings depending on who is looking at it. They aren't just surviving, they are actively playing with the semiotic rules of the game.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we start to see that entire ecosystems are actually vast overlapping webs of these signs. Ecology often reduces the interactions in a forest to energy transfers or food chains. Who eats who?
The food pyramid.
Right. But biosemiotics insists we look at them as chemical, acoustic, and visual dialogues.
The lima bean example in the research blew my mind.
It's a great one.
When a lima bean plant is attacked by a herbivore, like a caterpillar, it doesn't just sit there and suffer in silence. It emits something called VOCs. What are those?
Volatile organic compounds. It's a chemical distress signal. And it initiates a fascinating multi-layered semiotic process.
Okay, tell me more.
First, the VOC is a sign that warns neighboring plants to ramp up their own chemical defenses against the caterpillars.
Okay, so it's a neighborhood watch alert.
Yes, but secondly, that exact same sign attracts parasitic wasps that happen to prey on those specific caterpillars.
So, to put that in human terms, it's like my house getting broken into by a burglar. My home alarm system doesn't just make a loud noise to scare the guy, it automatically texts all my neighbors to lock their doors and simultaneously calls the cops to come arrest the intruder.
That is a perfect translation of what's happening.
It's one invisible chemical signal doing all of those jobs at once.
And the fidelity of those signs is what keeps the ecosystem balanced. We see the same thing in acoustic communication with avian communities.
Birds.
Right. Black-capped chickadees have alarm calls that encode highly specific information about the type of predator and the level of urgency.
Like hawk above versus cat below.
Exactly. But they aren't just talking to other chickadees. Nuthatches and warblers eavesdrop on these calls.
They're listening in.
The chickadee sign expands the individual perceptual worlds, the umwelten of multiple species, into a massive collective landscape.
It's a multi-species group chat. The birds are all tuned into the same radio frequency.
They really are.
And this is why the sources argue that ecological restoration is so much more complicated than we usually think. When we look at famous examples like Yellowstone National Park and the reintroduction of the wolves or the restoration of dying coral reefs, we aren't just managing physical populations of animals or rebuilding calcium carbonate rock structures.
No, we are attempting to repair the invisible semiotic web. When wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone, their presence didn't just alter prey numbers.
Right.
It reshaped the communicative behaviors of the elk, the flight patterns of the birds, even the growth of vegetation along the rivers, because the elk changed where they felt safe grazing.
It caused cascading semiotic
The
interactions.
same goes for coral reefs. When a reef degrades due to climate change, the semiotic network that marine species rely on to navigate, find food, and breed is silenced.
The sound of the reef dies.
The sound dies, the chemical trails vanish. Restoration must prioritize reestablishing the communicative health of the habitat, not just dropping concrete blocks in the ocean.
So, what does this all mean for you listening right now? How does adopting this biosemiotic lens actually change things?
The sources outline a profound ethical shift. When you recognize that every organism, from a microbe to a redwood tree, is an active meaning maker, your ethical framework naturally evolves.
How so?
The research notes that movements like deep ecology, ecocentrism, and ecofeminism are incredibly enriched by this view. Our ethical duty is no longer just about conserving physical resources, like counting how many board feet of timber are left in a forest.
Right, it's not an inventory.
It's about preserving the semiotic integrity of the planet. We have to ensure that the diverse sign systems that allow organisms to communicate and thrive are protected. Because to disrupt that communication, to introduce so much noise or chemical pollution that these creatures can no longer interpret their worlds, is to unravel the very fabric of life itself.
It makes the world feel so much more alive, doesn't it? It's not a giant machine ticking away. It's an endless, overlapping conversation that we are lucky enough to be a part of.
It really is.
And we want to leave you today with one final mind-expanding thought to mull over. We talked earlier about how these semiotic processes, this primitive meaning-making and interpretation in those ancient hydrothermal vents, actually preceded biological life.
The chemical signs were there before the cells were.
Exactly. So if meaning-making can exist in non-biological systems, does that mean the cosmos itself is fundamentally communicative? Could the universe be generating meaning in chemical or physical systems across the galaxy long before life as we know it ever takes shape?
This raises an important question, and it's a staggering possibility. It suggests we live in a cosmos of meaning, where biological life on Earth is simply the most complex expression of a universe that is constantly, tirelessly interpreting itself.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you go about your day today, we encourage you to look closely at your environment, the trees, the birds, even the bugs. Remember that you are walking through a living, breathing web of signs. They are all experiencing a reality you can't see, but one you are absolutely a part of. Keep asking questions, keep interpreting the signs, and we'll see you next time.